Welcome to the Liberty Show. I'm Manuel Carlos with Anti-Oligarchy. Tonight we have Andy Horning. Now, Andy has worked in the cardiovascular healthcare since 1979. His book, Stress Echocardiology, has been printed in 8 editions and has been used in CME-accredited medical education courses. It was his work in the heavily legislated and litigated field of healthcare that drove him to re-examine what he had been taught about the government's proper role in our lives. That re-examination and a study of both American history and Austrian school economics led him to libertarian political philosophy. He has since earned a reputation as a principled libertarian activist, writer, public speaker, and political candidate. His columns and opinions letters have appeared in over 25 newspapers in Indiana, as well as others around the nation, including the Houston Chronicle, the Wall Street Journal, and USA Today. His website, which we're going to show on the screen, wedeclare.wordpress.com. You can go and read articles that he posts on a regular basis. Welcome to the Liberty Show, Andy Horning.
It's good to be here. Thanks.
So it says on the opening there that what is the proper role of government in our lives? What would that be?
Well, you know, I suppose it's probably better to say the inevitable role of government, you know, because one of the things that, you know, that frustrates some of us is that we should be able to live without government at all. I mean, if we could behave ourselves, we wouldn't have to have, you know, this political government, you know, as we have it now or as we think of it. But of course, that's just not going to happen. We people love to have our alpha males, and we love to have our idols. We like to have the, you know, flags and the banners and all of the trappings of state, because it's a delegation. You know, government is something to which we can delegate our sins. You can have it kill the people we think need to be killed and steal from the people we think need to have stuff taken from them, and we can discount our accountability for it. So government, you know, serves a great reputation, you know, a great service as a cop-out. You know, so for people who want to do bad things, it's the excuse for doing bad things. And for people who have good dreams, it's the thing by which we fool ourselves into thinking that it's possible to do some of these things. So, yeah, you know, government it's a funny thing, and that, you know, you think about how people have these funny ideas about government. We should run government like a business. But one of the reasons people want government is to protect us from business. So the idea that, you know, we want to run government like Wall Street or run it by, you know, Martin Shkreli or whatever the case is, it's nuts.
You know that we hear that a lot. You know, we hear that I think from the Republican side. Well, we want a business person in and everything. But, you know, it's sort of like if you have a health issue, you're not necessarily going to go to a pro athlete who is, yes, he is healthy, but he knows nothing about medicine. And, you know, just because somebody's successful in business, they may not, you know the proper role of government. And we definitely don't want government. We don't want a boss or a CEO up there. We want somebody to protect our rights, is what I'm thinking.
Well, you know, another way to look at this is that government, you know, is in the Bible, they call it the sword of state. And you think about, you know, when do you pull out that sword? Do you want somebody who knows how to use, you want a kung fu guy to have this sword, or do you want somebody who's going to keep it in its sheath? You know, how often do you want to pull out this weapon that we call government? Because it's, you know, it's essentially what it is. You know, you only invoke government to do things that aren't going to happen without force, right? So, you know, you figure if we're not going to get roads, then we need government to force this to happen. Of course, that means the end of public transportation and, you know, people flying around in jetpacks as they imagined in the 1930s. But, you know, you think if government decides how things are going to go, that can be the way things go. But it also means that there's a lot of force involved in making that happen. And if you give that kind of force to businessmen, you know, like, you know, the CEO of Starbucks, or, you know, give F-16s to Microsoft and see how their business plans change. You know, that it's an entirely different picture when you start thinking about what government actually is versus our idolatrous sort of idea about what government is. You know, when we put our hands on our heart and we promise to obey the flag, what are most of us thinking? You know, it can be anything. We can be imagining that, you know, the United States flag is about Social Security. It can be about class basketball. It can be about, you know, whatever we want. We have an image that we're sort of praying to. And that image, it's a funny thing. And it varies from person to person. And yet, the collective power that we invest in that, and the money that we put in that, and the hopes we put in that, and sort of the blind spot that we have about the debts and the violence and the deceit. And, you think about what our government has already done in the past. Forget about slavery and the genocide of Indians, or the experimentation that we did on, black men, soldiers, children with plutonium. I mean, if you just forget all of that stuff that everybody has forgotten about, we still know the government has been spying on us since the days of telegraphs. We know that government has done, incredibly questionable things during World War II. I mean, well, actually, World War I. Why did we get into that to begin with? We find out the Gulf of Tonkin was, they just made it up. So, when you look to see what government has already done that we know about, and that we know that it's become more secretive and more powerful since those days when, there were, journalists who did exposés against government. And we've got a big problem here. And the problem isn't with government, it's with the people who have invested so much power in it, the people who keep voting for this corrupt, violent monstrosity.
What's interesting and maybe a little bit confusing, to me anyway, why do you think people continually keep at a system that is obviously broken? Because obviously it's funny to me because the other day I was talking to someone and, well, I'm going to vote for this person because well, they're bad, and the other people, but the other one's worse. And I always laugh, because I know that you're still voting, what is it? You're still voting for evil, right? Lesser of two evils. Well, then why?
If I could answer that, maybe I could address it somehow. Maybe I could affect it. But the fact is, all of us have some kind of blind spot. When you start talking about, with me, you start talking about Alfa Romeos, and I go, and all my senses go out. I don't get sensible about my, about my hobbies and stuff. So there are some things about which we will not make sense. And because most of us put most of our mind in everything else, like you think about I'm not into sports, I'm just not into professional sports, so I don't know anything about it. But I know that most people know a heck of a lot more about sports than they know about politics. And so you think about, what is it that we know about and we expect excellence from? We expect excellence from football. We expect excellence from, if we're going to go looking for a cell phone plan, we expect to get the best one, and we'll do research on it. If we're going to buy a new car, we're going to do, lots of research to, figure out what the reliability rates are, the performance statistics, how it feels when I sit in it. But when we hire a president, we don't go through so much diligence as we do if we were going to hire a janitor. So, if you were going to hire anybody for any job, you would want to look them in the face, you would ask them tough questions, you would look at their resume. Right. What do we do for presidents? What do we know about these people? How many people even know the name of their state rep? And so you look at just the total picture of, what it is that we imagine government should do, and there's some great dreams in that. If you just say, in fact, anybody, even in libertarian circles, you hear a lot of people saying, well, what we should do is we should make term limits. Well, who's going to do the term limits? Who's going to actually do this? Is it the incumbents that we vote for at an over 90% rate? So, if you're looking to see where the disconnect, where the nonsense is, most of us, have weird things going on in our heads where we know an awful lot about the things we're interested in, and we know nothing about what's most important in the determination of our life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. It's ignorance, brute pig ignorance. And then, they're dreams, and I can't fault people for having the dreams. And so when I listen to some people who are like Bernie fans, and they imagine Bernie is something that they want him to be. He's got they think he's the uppity grandfather, who's got some ideas, and he's fighting Wall Street. Well, no, he's not really. If you look at the history, no, he's not. But if you have that dream, if you have this imagination that somebody is out there fighting for you, it's a very ancient recipe for self-delusion. And we've been doing it for thousands of years. And I don't know if a pack of coyotes does this when they're looking at their alpha male and saying, well, he's going to lead us to greater coyoteness or something. I don't know if all animals have the same sort of thing, but it is something apparently so in our DNA that we have to have this government abstraction. We have to, bow down to it. It's our God. It's a religion. It's something that we pray to. We say, save us from these bad guys overseas. Save us from these evil companies. Save us from unions. Save us from whatever. It's always a kind of a deity thing, and it's weird because it's been proven bunk for thousands of years. But there it is. It's there, and I can't do anything about it.
Well, it is an interesting thing that you mention religion, because it most definitely falls under that category. Although, if you were to tell somebody that statism is a religion, they would just be horrified and be like, no, it's not. That's not a religion. Separation of religion and politics. Yeah, like that's ever a case. But
well, we define things how we want. So we use words the way we want, and then we misuse words. And so even things like liberal and conservative have swapped meaning many times. And I suppose when I invoke a word like religion, you have to understand that there is something. I just, when you said that, I was kind of thinking, yes, I've already used the words like idolatry and stuff, and we paint that as a religious thing, but it's not a religious thing. It's an actual effect. And in fact, you even look in the Bible where it talks about, what people tend to do, like 1 Samuel 8 verses 6 through 20 is all about, the danger of putting faith in human government. And so whether you're looking at the Quran, which also says similar things, interestingly enough, if you're looking at all the ancient wisdom literature, if you're looking at, thousands of years of writing by, the Greek, practically everything, from the very first novels, from the very first dramas, from the very first, words that we have seen inscribed into rocks, there have been warnings about putting your faith in the wrong place. And whether you call it a religion or just misplaced faith, it is faith. How else do you explain what we keep doing with war, for instance? Why do we keep thinking that war is a good idea? What problems is it going to solve when we've not had a year's peace since the war to end all wars? It just doesn't make any sense. So you think about the warnings that I've lately been getting kind of fascinated with reading Lawrence of Arabia. And I don't know if you guys have ever read any of T.E. Lawrence's stuff, but he wrote pretty significant warnings about what was already apparent during those early after the fall of the Ottoman Empire. He had two warring factions. And interestingly, because it's the same thing happening today, he was warning about how the British were funding both the side that T.E. Lawrence was on, which is sort of the Egyptian group of Muslims, but then the British were also behind this group that was, the coming of the Wahhabis, sort of a rebirth of it was the House of Saud. And so the Saudis are the ones that the British eventually went to. So we actually suppressed the people who had suppressed Wahhabism for 100 and some odd years, and we actively started promoting the House of Saud, which has been for the past century the agent of promoting what used to be a dying sect of Islam. So if you look to see, the British made the same mistakes that we're making right now 100 years ago, and so what are we doing in Syria? We're fighting ourselves in Syria. We're basically training our enemies. We've done this, with the Mujahideen. We've done this in South America. We've done this everywhere, where we identify some kind of a threat and we train them and arm them. And then we have to fight them. And then we pay the Northern Alliance to fight the Taliban. We pay the Taliban to fight the Northern Alliance. All of this nonsense that we are spending our blood and treasure for when we're already trillions and trillions in debt. It's nuts. And it will be, it'll be fatal one way or the other.
Yeah, most definitely. I mean, what you're describing is classically the the military-industrial complex at its finest.
We were warned.
Yeah, and I don't know about you. I personally don't really see an end to it anytime soon. Well, I mean that from their standpoint, it will. Oh, there'll be an end, all right, but it's not going to be a.
Gibbon wrote a very thick book about that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. When we were sending messages back and forth, you wanted to talk about, we've talked about now how, us as a society have sort of given this power to to the government to do some of this stuff in our name. But you wanted to touch on the corruption in the two parties. And I haven't followed your case since you were on the Liberty Show last time. Has anything changed with your case? Can you talk about that? I know you were challenging that, I think, in Indiana, correct?
Yeah, it was in a federal court, and they finally did just dismiss it, 2 weeks ago. And so basically, it was for lack of interest, and I'm not going to pursue it further because the people just aren't interested in it. And if there's no interest, the way courts work is they'll go on precedent. They'll basically call it stare decisis or settled law until public pressure makes them change it, and then they call it a landmark case. And so basically everything revolves on, you see these big movements in American society. It's never the courts that lead those. It's always people who determine which way things are going to go. And right now, as long as the two-party system keeps getting our votes, as long as they get attaboys, the judges who come out of that two-party system are not going to do anything to change it. That's their meal ticket, that's their friends list, that's their power structure. So, if you're looking to see what I was fighting, I didn't fool myself about my chances in court. By myself, I knew that my case would have no chance unless I got media, unless I got, some public interest in fighting the corruption. And unfortunately, we have partitioned our views of corruption in kind of a dumb way. So you have the Democrats who kind of think of Wall Street, and they think of, like the Occupy Wall Street people. They get it. They get that there's some corruption. The Republicans have sort of an opposite thing. It's these, the unions and all this other, these cronies, the Democratic Party itself, they rig elections and they dead people vote. And they're right, so they get it too. The problem is they're not coming together. They're not agreeing that this whole system, Democrats and Republicans together, are playing this game of special deals for special people. It's all cronies. It starts from, the bottom up and then back down again. We've got these like precinct committee people who will get somebody elected because they know that's going to mean, it's going to be good for their business. It's going to be good for their kids getting jobs. It's basically a tight-knit group that you and I are not in. We're not in that crowd.
Definitely.
So most of us are not in it, and most of us know that there's bad stuff. In fact, actually, you ask anybody knows that the system is corrupt. But this is another one of those weird blind spots. I don't get, you're talking about why do we keep doing stuff that doesn't work. I don't get why we all know that our system is corrupt, and yet it's the one thing that never comes up in political discussions. We ask ideological questions, like, how do you feel about abortion? And that's a litmus test. And we don't look to see where they got all their money. And so, you can have somebody who says he's pro-life, but he gets all of his money from Planned Parenthood. Or you get somebody who said he's pro-choice, but he gets all of his money from these church organizations. You don't follow the money. You don't know who this guy is. You don't know who hired him. And so if we're not following the basics, of what we already know about the corrupt system, about, the payola and the ancient stuff that has been revealed in the past in America. We've had many times where, groups were busted up by journalists doing their job, and then a court case, and then whether it's Tammany Hall or something like that. There was stuff that happened that people get busted up, and but now journalists are owned by the same people. Well, at least the companies that hire these journalists are owned by the same people that own the Democrat and Republican parties and operate our military-industrial complex. And you have a fairly small number of people that operate most of the significant power, well, practically in the world. So, you've got a few competing groups between the BRIC nations and, sort of the Western Bloc nations. And so it's not entirely like a one world government, but you can see that the idea here is that it's all corruption. And as much as these people would like to consolidate, they will, because that just makes them more secure. And as long as we keep voting for them, then we're just saying, keep doing what you're doing. And it doesn't matter which Democrat or which Republican, because it's the system of precinct committee people, the laws that empower them, the special, just to reiterate, I don't remember if we went over this last time, but only Democrats and Republicans are they're invited in the primary system. Only they can fill vacancies. That's a powerful thing. So if somebody dies in office, or if there's a seat that wasn't even opposed and didn't get elected during the election, they can just plop somebody in there. Only they can be on the recount commission, the election commission. Only they can have precinct committee people. So you look to see the range of powers and influence that they've granted themselves by law, and really only since the 1970s. People think this has been going on forever, but we didn't have primaries until, in fact, all states did not have primaries until the late 1970s. And we didn't have primaries at all 100 years ago. So you think about how rapidly, since World War II, the two-party system has sort of, accumulated, legal power and special rights and immunities and such under law that none of the rest of us can have access to. I mean, not only is that unconstitutional by both Indiana and U.S. Constitution, it's obviously just corrupt as all get out.
I did not know that about the primaries in all the states until the 70s. Now, I'm sure you've caught this in the news, but it was one of the RNC, the national guys. He's come out and admitted, he says, well, the people don't choose the candidates. We do, the party, but they've had this state-funded primary, state-funded, advertising system that they fool the people into thinking that they actually have a say in it. Of course, we discovered that was not true, because before we joined the Libertarian Party, we were Ron Paul delegates, and we went down to the state in Indiana, and we were told to shut up and sit down.
Yeah.
And that's where it people think that there's something, like the founding fathers, created the Democrat and Republican Party. That's not true at all. And in fact, they warned us against that kind of thing. And the early, this first group of politicians called the Republicans, that included Jefferson, was not what became the Republican Party. That actually turned into the Democratic Republican Party. But it wasn't a party as such for quite a while, and and then it split off and became other things, and there were lots of parties, know nothings, Whigs, lots and lots of parties. Socialist parties were getting elected to governors' roles and all that through the 1920s. Really, World War II changed a lot of that, and the notion of a two-party system didn't really exist until after World War II. Because if you look at election results and you see how third parties at the high state level, and in fact even Senate level, we even had, we had more independent senators than, we still have a couple, I suppose, but there used to be more. And it's really happened fairly recently that you see these blowouts where you have Democrats, Republicans taking practically all of the election with just single digits going to others. You look to see, like when the GOP was a third. Well, actually, when Abraham Lincoln was elected, it was a four-way race, and it wasn't like anybody got single digits back then. The 3 and 4, candidates for president were all in the 20s and sometimes 30s, and it was much more closely aligned as far as the political parties and powers, because they didn't have any special powers granted by law back then. So parties came and went.
When we hear about Lincoln, though, don't we always hear just about the Lincoln Douglas? He wasn't running in a primary against Douglas. Douglas was
no primaries. No primaries.
Yeah. So, but when they talk about it, we only hear about those two, right? I mean, they're framing that for us. We never hear about that there was more than two candidates. They want us to believe that there's just two choices. Always.
And in fact, that was the Democratic Party split back. And in fact, there's a whole bunch of stuff related. The Illinois politics has always been corrupt, and if you're looking to see the allegations of how Lincoln's delegates stuffed the ballots, to get him, he was an insignificant character in the Republican Party until he made it onto this ballot, and kind of by the same sort of secret rules you're talking about. It's internal party stuff. Political parties are private clubs. There's nothing government. I mean, they're quasi-governmental only because they've made themselves so. But they are still private clubs in structure. They have whatever rules they want, and they can change them anytime they want. They are their own clubs, and they can do what they want. So when it comes to what happened, in those days where the Democrats split up, and there were the Free Democrats, and this kind of same thing happened when the Republican Party sort of split itself when they were the Progressive Party, remember? And they had the Bull Moose Party, and then and one of the things that I find amazing is when all these people keep bringing up these myths about how third-party candidates, you're just going to elect the Democrats, or sometimes you elect the Republicans. When Nader, he gave us Bush, and Perot gave us, Clinton, and the dumb thing is nobody's thinking about that. They know that it's going to throw the race some way, but with these third-party candidates, we're going to get, this either a Democrat or Republican. But without the third-party candidates, you're going to get a Republican or a Democrat. What's the difference?
Right. There's no
Exactly.
difference.
And so when they're talking about this, they're not making any sense, and they don't know the history. They don't know that this is a recent phenomenon. It didn't used to work like that at all, and nobody talked about the wasted vote until I think that was like the 1980s when that first became kind of a thing with the wasted vote syndrome.
I was just recently reading a little blurb about that online, and as a matter of fact, one of my friends asked me. She knows I'm active in the Libertarian Party, obviously, and she's just like, well, I'm really considering it, but I just can't help but feel like it's a wasted vote. And I think if I hear that phrase again,
here's the dumb thing: why do we have elections at all?
right? I know.
It's really supposed to be a peaceful revolution. We are supposed to use this instead of guns. So instead of marching down to the city hall and shooting everybody, we can just fire the bombs. Now, if we were to put that in its proper perspective like that, then maybe that would help, dissuade us from treating elections like poker chips, where it's got odds, and, we have to, the odds are, and the game we have to play is, the strategery I have to use with my vote is such that, I can't do it this way. I can't vote for who I want. And why do we not even imagine that the powers that be want us to think that way? If you think about manipulations, and if you think about, what would secure their power better than to make it seem like that all the other options are, they're just silly. No, you can't possibly vote for someone other than us. That just would ruin everything. And of course they would say that. Why would we buy it, though? Why would we believe that? Why would we even show up on election day if we don't have some kind of serious purpose, other than, I got beer, I just got to vote for such and such.
Yeah, I would go as far as to say if you're wasting your vote if you vote Democrat or Republican, and you didn't vote, and I would also say that you did not vote if you voted Democrat or Republican, because your vote doesn't make a difference if you vote for one of those two.
This is where corruption comes in. If we really talked about corruption the way we should, then we should be the ones who are saying, you've got to explain yourself. How dare you vote Democrat or Republican again? You have a lot of explaining to do if you're going to vote for what is a messed up system. This is a crime ring, and you're going to vote for it? You're going to approve these guys again? And, if we were to just start hammering some of that stuff, about how you want term limits, but you've got over 90% of incumbents getting, reelected, re-rewarded every single election cycle, and it's 100% incumbent reelection of both those two parties that we know to be messed up. Now, we should be pushing that back into people's faces. We should be talking about, that this is a corrupt system, right? That these people have, I guess what we have to do is a little information to let them know that legally they have done some things that are unconstitutional and yet give them power. We have to let them know that this is a new system. There's nothing, this is not in our constitutions. This is not how our founders envisioned this. if we just explain a few pieces that might not be in their head, they might not have the total picture of corruption, and they might not realize that no, it wouldn't be the same if another party got into power and got corrupt, because the first time people used their power of peaceful revolution to fire the bums, the message would be out. People are sick of this. It would be voters who are then doing the work of the election. It's not the candidates they're poker chips. The candidates are the ones that are just game pieces. Voters are the people with power on election day. That's the one day when all of the people on K Street, all of the people on Wall Street, all of the people in precincts all over the place that are counting on the next election being their meal ticket, that's when they're listening. And if voters fire that whole system and turn it on its ear, all of this business of political appointees, of permanent people who make their living as campaign managers, the people who make yard signs and all of this stuff and are selling really only to Democrats and Republicans to speak of. If we challenge all of that and turn it on its head, you think that for the next 50 years people wouldn't be remembering this as a big deal? It would be huge.
I wonder if we can fit that. Explain yourself if you voted Democrat or Republican on bumper sticker. I wonder if that would.
Yeah, that's the problem. Anything you need to say in politics has to fit on a bumper sticker that gets said. And if you can't say it in 10 seconds, if you can't put it on a bumper sticker, then people lose patience.
Right.
But look to see people crowding around in a bar, watching a baseball game, and baseball. And I was like, what? How does that affect your life? And is that?
Well, and quite frankly, it would have to take place in a bar because baseball is so hideously boring. I think you would require beer.
I tried that. I thought I had a pip of an idea back in the 1990s where I thought I'd do the Citizen Soapbox Forum. And we would, go to a local pub or something like that, and we would, invite people to have 2 minutes at the microphone and hold forth. And it was fun for me. It was fun for the people who did it. But, it didn't catch on because, people would shush you to say, hey, we're trying to watch a football.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And you know what? I think the political attitude towards a lot of people, too, is sports related. Oh, our guy didn't win. Our team, our side didn't win this time. We'll come back next season, and they don't really, they don't even get into. They don't understand why. You get the Cruz, the Rubio out there, and you get the Republicans especially. They talk about the Constitution, and their followers don't know what the Constitution was, and I think most Americans don't know what the intent of the Constitution is. You probably could get everybody to agree, we need to follow the Constitution. They don't know what it is, and they don't know what the intent of it was. Right. So as these candidates are promoting big government and more government in your life, they're telling you that they're following the Constitution, and their followers believe that because they just don't know the intent of it.
Well, you just prey on the ignorance constantly.
Well, that's why on that wedeclare.wordpress.com site that you mentioned early on, I have put copies. I've annotated the Indiana and U.S. Constitution. They're there, and you could download a PDF. I'm not going to do another app because that didn't seem to, go very far. But you can download the PDF and look at it and see where. Some people, they say that my annotations are all they read. But even if you just do that, it's better than not, getting any exposure at all to the Constitution. Because let's be honest, how many people have. There are probably 6 people in Indiana who've read the Indiana Constitution. And if you imagine the number of people that carry around a pocket Constitution and they've thumbed through it and they've read little bits and pieces of it, but they've never really understood, what it's all about. The problem of constitutions is that I don't think we're ever going to get people to actually read them. And yet, the good news in all of this is that the only people that really matter in politics are those who do get involved, and a very disproportionately small number of people can have a very large effect because so few people even try to get involved in politics. So if a few of us actually do read the constitutions, and by reading the constitutions you become an expert on it because they're simple, like the Bill of Rights are only one sentence apiece. So if you master that one sentence of the First Amendment and people know that you're a First Amendment expert, you can have a disproportionate effect on politics just because you've read these darn things. And so, if a few of us who want to be involved in politics were to arm ourselves just a little bit so we can sound like we're intelligent and we can actually speak truth about these laws, then, I guess at that point, when people start listening, which I think is going to happen soon, because I think you're going to see both stock market and housing markets are going to go through some serious stuff shortly. Very shortly, we're going to have a lot of people with a lot of trouble, and we have to get prepared for that moment when there's kind of a hinge point. Either they're going to listen to us, or they're going to listen to the alpha males who are marching the brown shirts through the streets, or whatever the next scenario is going to be. Because in times of social upheaval, you have a lot of opportunity. You also have a lot of danger. And what we've seen in the past is that the times where you have riots and all of that kind of stuff, there are big changes happening. They can be good changes, but it would take a few of us who are well informed and passionate and have some gumption and stick-to-itiveness to be in the right places. We have to. It's kind of like, we're using a sports analogy, which I don't know anything about. It's like we might get the ball thrown to us, and we might have a chance to make a shot at the basket. We have to be prepared. So we have to be on the court, so to speak. We have to be, trained and ready to. Am I doing the sports analogy okay?
I think so, but you know what? We're not sports fans either.
Okay, good. Then I'll just keep going with it.
Okay.
So we can make it the free throw line to make a touchdown. If we're prepared for that. And so the idea that it takes the masses to do stuff is not true at all. We don't have to get the masses. And the thing I like most about alternative parties is not just that we're not the two-party system, or that we're not corrupt yet, or any of that stuff. It's just that it doesn't take as many people to make sense. You only need to get 30% of the voters to make sense and make a good choice. You don't have to get over half the people to make a good choice. 33 1/3 might do it if you have a few people that, you have 4 candidates and one of them gets 3 votes. If you get a really. And in fact, I think we've got to be close to some kind of a hinge point here. In this election cycle, where so many people are disgusted,
Yeah.
I think that if it's going to be Hillary and Trump, who I'm not sure they weren't identical twins, I mean, just in terms of ideology and corruption and, just deceit, that whole sort of picture, they're so close.
They go to the same hairdresser.
Yes, apparently.
Who's a libertarian magician? I'm blanking on his name right now.
Penn Jillette.
Penn Jillette. He had the best description of his hair. I'm not going to say any more about it, but if you look that up, it's very colorful.
Well, Gary Johnson is really, he's going around and he's taking advantage of the situation that you're just talking about, letting him know that there's a choice. He was in the Wall Street Journal, I think it was today or yesterday, and he talked about the potential. The article is the potential of a Republican trying to come in to our convention and take over, but he's all for that because he's just hoping that he doesn't think they're going to be successful, but that the light is we're going to get more media coverage, and maybe with people being disgusted, we're going to get some more attention. I had a guy in the gym talk to me the other day, and he goes, Manuel, he said, you're going to hate me for this, but he goes, I'm going to vote for Hillary because I just can't stand Trump. And he goes, and I don't like Hillary, but I can't stand Trump. And I'm like,
hello.
I said, why not vote Libertarian or don't vote at all, but vote Libertarian, we're going to have a candidate. What, you are?
Yeah, and that's, people don't know. And in fact, I've
nothing wrong with,
Well, I've always been amazed at the number of people who think that libertarians have never won any races at all, and that when they hear that they have won some elections, even in Indiana, they show a lot of surprise. And because people don't know that we have candidates, all over the ballot, and that we've actually won races, that we're going to have 50 state ballot access, all of that, they don't know that stuff. It warps their decisions, and that's where the media has really been letting us down. As the mouthpiece of democracy, sort of the defenders of the truth, they really sold us out. Yeah. And if we could get just a few people to do their jobs in the media, and to show that there actually are alternatives, and to do this in a less, every time I've run for office, it's always been the same thing where they say, well, the Democrat is so-and-so, and the Republican is so-and-so, and they talk for, several paragraphs about those guys. Also running is Andy Horning. And so, when they do that, they're giving this imprimatur of legitimacy to the Democrats and Republicans, and making us out to be like, well, we got to say something about these guys, but really they're a little bit scary. You don't want to meet one of these guys in a dark alley, whatever. It's something they're painting a really biased, really wrong picture of what the options are in the ballot. And as long as journalists no longer do that job of exposing corruption, that's probably an even bigger problem. And that, as long as they keep saying things like, there's never any election fraud. Well, we proved it. We've proven that, that maybe 10% of the vote in inner city areas is dead people, or just they pick names off of these voter rolls that should have been purged. And you have areas that are literally over 100% voter turnout, and these poor areas where you'd expect it to be more like 10% or less. So, when we have this kind of stuff going on right under the media's nose, you got to wonder, what are you guys there for? I mean, it's just the sales section, the comics,
they're obviously bought and sold of the same caliber as the Republicrats.
Yeah.
they are owned by them. So if a journalist, and I don't even like to call them journalists anymore, because to me that's like tarnishing the title of journalism.
Well, there are good journalists. There are good people. The institutions are totally corrupt. They're bought out.
Yeah.
But there are ideologues out there that are not given free rein.
Yeah.
And that I've heard all these things. Having been in journalism myself, and having met a lot of these people through the years, I have kind of a heart for them to a degree. But then again, you got to say that when they say stuff like, well, we can't sell what people won't buy. People want to hear, they want the sports section, they want the Sunday sales, they want, a few key things. And other than that, we try to push more politics in, but people won't buy it. Mm-hmm. And you look at like the evening news, I've been told over and over again that it's not even really the journalists in some cases where they'd like to have more actual news, but people won't buy it, and they don't want to lose viewers because then they can't sell anything to us. They can't do politics if we're not watching. So, a lot of it comes back once again to the rest of us, where, yes, journalists have a role in this. Yes, politicians, the Democrats, Republicans, they're screwing up terribly. But ultimately, it always falls back on our neighbors. And so we have to do personal appeals, kind of one-on-one to the people we know. We have to reach as many people as we can. And unfortunately, I vary a lot from the view that, you have to start small. You have to, why don't you run for, an assistant dog catcher or something like that, and then you'll actually get elected. But in since people don't even know that libertarians have won elections, that isn't working. And that's not how politics it's never worked that way ever. Things happen from Perot down. So you have the birth of a whole new political party because you have one personality at the top who can drive it. If Trump decides he wants to start a third party of his own, he might very well do that. He'll have a huge army of people that would be following him along, and that really could screw up the election. He could do that. And so, I guess ultimately, it always comes back to the same thing. We have to somehow appeal to the most people we can, and I think the best way to do that is from higher positions on the ballot, not the winnable races, but the ones that get the most ears and have the most likelihood of reaching people with libertarian ideas. I mean, another thing is, when you have people talking, you're running for a county coroner, and I want to talk about what we're going to do with Israel.
Yeah, right.
Well, really, then the level of priorities get the message out, and first, and if we get elected, that's the bonus, right? And because we got to change people's opinion.
Yes,
we got to get out there.
And that's the key thing is, elections are not up to us. The candidates are just, candidates are options. The people actually doing the choosing are the voters. So, if you're talking about, this is an employer-employee, hiring situation here. The candidate is just a candidate. That's all they are. We can put out our resume however we want to describe that thing. We can do our job interviews on bumper stickers, however we want to do that. But ultimately speaking, voters are in charge, whether they like to admit it or not, whether they're trying to defer their accountability and blame others for it or not. The fact is, it is all up to voters. That's the one day where politicians are paying attention to voters. And so if voters are the people that we have to get to, then I think that, if we want to talk strategy in any sense related to elections, this is it. We got to get to the people making the choices. And we have to get to them in a way that we can talk about what's different. We have to be able to talk about corruption, and we have to be able to talk about the ideology of smaller government versus all-powerful government. And so if we're talking, you can get too crazy with that. People start arguing, like within libertarian circles, they start talking about, the non-aggression principle, zero with zap and nap and all of that stuff. You lose people that way. We have to reach people with things that they already know, like corruption, and they already know that. Endless war, they already know that. And they know that our police are getting more heavily armed and scarier, and they're, now that we know that, cops actually, I don't want to disrespect cops, but they are stealing more of our money than everybody else combined. So if you're looking at just the property seizures and all of this stuff, people know this. They just have to be informed of it in such a way that they understand it's their choice whether we keep going in that direction or not. It's their choice whether we can turn this around. It is completely in their power to stop the endless wars, to turn around the debts, do something about our banking system, our military-industrial complex. We could fix it if we get to the people who are capable of fixing it, and that's voters. We just let them know both their power and their accountability.
Right. So we don't want to talk in terms of the abstract, like you say, the non-aggression principle. We want to talk about these issues, these hot buttons, and we can eventually go back as we can talk about the role of government and things. But when you talk about the military-industrial complex or the civil asset forfeiture, that's what we need to talk about.
Yeah,
and some of those hot
or
button
whatever
issues.
they know about.
Yeah, whatever they know about. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and generally you're going to find that somebody has some kind of hot button issue. And it's going to be a different one for each person, too. That's the hard part.
Well, if they're a coal miner, it's kind of easy to tell with that. Well, no, I take that back. You have those coal miners for Hillary kind of phenomenon that happens every now and then. So, there's a lot of stuff that that doesn't make sense, and there are some people you can't reach. And so, there is a point at which you do have to kind of write some people off. But there are lots of people. You find anybody who's a follower of Trump or of Bernie. So Sanders and Trump, they are escape valves. That these are people who are ticked off at, they think that they're not the system. They are the system. Sanders and Trump are fully, in the system. And in fact, Trump is not just corrupt; he's an active corrupter himself. So people don't get that. But what they do get is that that they're a shakeup. We need a shakeup. You find out what the issue is driving them to want a shakeup, because just looking at it in a dispassionate way, Trump and Sanders are not status quo candidates. They might be part of the system, but they're not status quo. Something would change if we got those guys. And so the people who are supporting them want change. Why do they want change? It's our job to find out, in any given group, what is it that's driving you guys to want change? And then we have to let them know that there is a better way to achieve that change. Just like, there are times when it's appropriate to take to the streets and riot. Sometimes that's made things happen in the past, like the civil rights movement. And, you had both the carrot and the stick. You had, Martin Luther King Jr. on the peaceful side. You had the Black Panthers on the, you had like the good cop and the bad cop, the yin and the yang. And that happens. We've already got a lot of angst. A lot of people are taking up their guns. but we've not really tried the peaceful alternative yet. We've not tried to use our vote, which is which is what the founders intended, is the whole purpose of having that vote. So, we've taken to the streets. We've had our protest signs. We're jumping over people's cars to try to stop the Trump rallies and stuff like that. So we're mad. We're getting into the streets. I see that as good. But what we need is to have the peaceful alternative also. And that's what Election Day is supposed to be. So if we're the ones who are offering the same peaceful alternative, this is a great opportunity for us. We don't have to be the tinfoil hat, mouth-breathing zealots that people thought of us in the past. We could be the adults that are coming and saying, guys, we've not even tried this yet. There's this means of peaceful revolution, and you're talking about armed insurrection, all this. Let's try this first. Let's try to do this election a little differently than we've done it in the last dozens of years, because once we let people know that it was not always we didn't have a two-party system before. We used to have lots of parties. We used to have lots of parties come and go. This is new, and it's something that's not good, and it's not good, and it's time to do something about it. And the way to do something about this is just vote it away.
Right. Talk about corruption, and you talked about some of those anti-Trump protests. We find out that those are actually being funded by Soros and everything too. So there's the corruption right there. So some of these protests are not even genuine.
Most aren't.
But that's always happened. Whether it's the Trayvon Martin kind of things where you have people hired to come in and agitate, and then you have people coming in to swoop in and take advantage of it and be the leaders that are going to save us from all of this. That always happens. And unfortunately, it takes an awful lot to bring people up to the recognition of that. And it gets too easy for us to start invoking Hitler and then people kind of, they see us as zealots then. And so the hard thing for us to do is moderate our tendency to speak all the truth all at once. So we have to find out, where people are at right now. Find out what it is that's, what is it that's bugging you. And if you know about this corruption, we have a wedge. Everybody knows about the corruption to some degree. If we can get them to articulate it in their own mind enough that they can see that this two-party system really does suck, and that you really don't like it anyway. You never did. You're always wondering, am I really going to be voting for the lesser of two evils again? And everybody goes through that in their head. They have to. And if we can just appeal to them as people and say, I feel your pain. I've done this before. We have a better way to look at this. And why don't you just try it? This is a pivotal time in our history. Things are getting so screwed up because we keep doing the same thing over and over again. It's getting worse and worse and worse, and it's getting worse and worse and worse. The deaths are not getting smaller, they're getting bigger. The wars are not going away, we're just getting more of them, and they're getting scarier. So now that we've got Russia ticked off at us again, that we've got it looks like all the pieces are starting to kind of gather for a World War III scenario. Boy, I sure wish we had tried something else.
Well, that's why we're doing this, and we need to. We're about out of time here, Andy. We're going to wrap up. Anything that you wanted to add?
Well, just that if anyone is interested in learning more about the Libertarian Party, we have information. We'll put it up on the screen. We have the website now, libertyshow.info, and we'll put that website up. And I think we'll link to Andy's website on there as well.
That'd be great.
So,
yep.
Well, we appreciate you joining us again on the Liberty Show, Andy, and appreciate what you do, spreading the message out there. Thank you for showing up, and we hope to talk to you soon.
Thanks.